Okay, so because I'm not going to be there, I thought I would go through this speech with you um, through a YouTube video, which you can watch in your own time and analyze. So I'm going to be speaking towards it under the assumption that you've already watched it, which is the instructions I'm going to be leaving on Google Classroom, and under the assumption that you have your transcript with you. If you don't do those things or have those things, fix that so that you can take notes around the actual transcript. If you don't have your booklet, shame on you. But more importantly, write notes into your book, which you can then transfer into your transcript. So, Severin Suzuki's address to the plenary session is about a young girl who's quite young at the time, like 13, 14, talking at a UN conference about climate change and about social inequality as a result of climate change. It's important to remember that the context of the speech is that she's trying to convince the audience of mostly adults that action needs to be taken. So what I'm going to be doing is running through a couple of techniques that are used within the speech writing that you need to identify and explaining how they're used, essentially. So the first thing that's used is anaphora. A lot of the speech in the segments begin with "I am," and the purpose of that is to highlight the voice. It's to highlight the fact that this is her own personal story, this is her own point of view, but most importantly, when she says "I am," and she's talking about her own thoughts, but she's actually, and she addresses it, is that she's part of a larger group. She's part of a many. She is a representative of a larger cause. And when she says "I am," and when she repeats "I am" so often, what she's saying is that she is the generation. So you could describe her voice in many ways. So she's the voice of her generation. She is the voice of an activist, and she's the voice of children. All of which is encapsulated in that "I am," in that repetition in the beginning of successive clauses, that anaphora. If you were to use this technique, you can use repetition, but the most correct term is anaphora. She uses direct addresses, particularly with the word of "you." She creates a clear dichotomy between her as the speaker and the audience, and creates a separation between the two by saying "you." It's a direct challenge, and a direct contrast between her. It's not this isn't an abstract speech. She's not speaking to an audience that is undefined. She's actually speaking to a very clear audience of adults in a room, and that contrast between her and the audience continues on from that symbol of her as being part of the generation, that when she says "you," she's actually talking to the past generation. She's talking to the decision makers of the time, particularly because she is the voice of children, because she is the voice of an activist. She's talking about the people that need to be swayed. In contrast to that, she actually uses a lot of inclusive language. When she talks about actions that need to be taken, she uses "we." She uses that inclusive pronoun of "we," in that idea of progression. It's that point of convincing. That's the purpose of this. This is a persuasive speech designed to move and designed to make the lawmakers feel something. So when just as much as she separates herself from them, she actually says, "This is our issue. This is us together. This is a we issue instead of a me issue or a you issue." Cumulative listing is something she uses quite often. The clearest example is the "you don't know." So you don't know how to fix this, you don't know how to fix that. She uses that listing to increase intensity, because if you notice that the things that she's saying that you don't, meaning the adults don't, know how to fix, each of those become more dire as she goes ahead, and each of them become more have a greater impact on the lives of future generations. So things like rainforests and food supply and clean water. At the end of that cognitive list, particularly that specific example, she uses antithesis by saying, you don't know how to fix this, and if you don't know, stop breaking it. It's that direct challenge. It's signaling out her audience and giving them a reason to listen and giving them a reason as to why they should care. And that language, particularly because she spent a lot of that time talking about the we and the I am, to go to the you and almost condemning based on that language. She's condemning them for their actions and challenging them to be better in their actions. As part of her persuasive devices, she uses an anecdote when she talks about one child told us in Brazil. The reason for the anecdote is it increases the scope. It makes it a personal story, and it makes her more than just her, because we remember that she is a symbol for multiple people. So if we go with that idea that she's a symbol, the anecdote actually gives more experiences of others to link into the overall idea. And that scope means that this is international, because remember, she's a Canadian girl speaking in Rio, but these are issues that Brazilian children care about, and the assumption is that children all over the world care about it. Spelling mistake. Rhetorical questions is used frequently throughout it. So the purpose of the questions range from thought-provoking to bringing the idea into the audience as well. So things like, actually I'm going to bring them up. So, for example, when she says, then why do you go out and do the things you tell us not to do? That's to provoke thought, and that's the idea of, making us feel guilty. That's the purpose of that. It's a direct challenge to the audience. But at the same time, let's find another one. Did you worry about these things when you were my age? That use of rhetorical question is there to make the audience, which is these older people, understand that this is an issue that affects them, and this is an issue that affects people in their situations, and it tries to connect them to the issue, which is something that what she believed, based on the language, she believes that they have previously been separated from the issue, that they don't care about the issue, that this isn't something important to them. So the use of rhetorical questions are there to challenge assumptions and challenge the perspectives. So that is all I'm going to give you at this point. Don't want to overwhelm you. What I would like you to do is I would like you to write a response identifying what you think the voice in this speech is, so the plenary address to the plenary session. I want you to identify what you think the voice of this speech is, and I want you to justify it using 3 pieces of evidence. Okay? And I will check that when I get back. Cheers.